Hey guys, welcome to Sports Fan Network. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Travis.
And today we're going to be previewing the NFC Championship game between Philadelphia Eagles and the Minnesota Vikings. And boy, to think about we're this late in the season with the Vikings going against the Eagles here, this should be an exciting game with two defensive-minded teams. I'm predicting a low-scoring one in this one, but basically for this preview, we're going to be doing the keys for the game for each team. Starting with the Vikings, Travis, what are the keys to this game for the Vikings to pull off a win here?
Yeah, starting with the Vikings, they need to attack the Eagles secondary. The best part of the Eagles defense is their front seven. Their secondary is not nearly as good as that. For the Vikings, they need to be able to expose that. They have two very good wide receivers in Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs had a great game-winning catch at the buzzer last week against New Orleans Saints, which if you're Marcus Williams and Saints fans, just heartbreak and embarrassment. That was a crazy play. But for the Vikings to beat the Eagles, they need to be able to attack the Eagles secondary. I think Casey Keenum's going to have a very big game against them.
Yeah, the strength of this Vikings offense is actually the receiving core, if you can believe it. Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Kyle Rudolph, all those guys, they form a formidable receiving core for Case Keenum to throw the ball to. So how they match up against the Eagles, the Eagles, they do have a pretty strong secondary, I believe, with Malcolm Jenkins back there as a safety to kind of anchor the unit. But if there is a weakness to their defense, I agree, it is their secondary. So they'll need to expose maybe some mismatches in that, in the secondary for the Vikings. And I think, for the Vikings sticking with their offense, they need to really stick with a balanced attack. They can't just rely on the passing game. Obviously, it's going to be harder it's easier said than done because the Eagles' front seven is so stout, led by Fletcher Cox in the middle of that defense that it's just going to be really tough, I think, for the Vikings to be able to run the ball. But they're going to have to establish some sort of running game if they're going to have any chance, I feel like, because if they're going to be one-dimensional offensively, the Eagles' pass rush is just going to get after Case Keenum all game long. So making sure that they can stay balanced, I think, for the game will go a long way to keeping, an effective game plan going for the offense to make sure they can stay on the field and put some points on the board. Because it's not like they're going to need to necessarily light it up, I think, because their defense is really good. Nick Foles is a backup quarterback. You're not really sure how much of they're going to get, if the Eagles are going to get that much out of Nick Foles at the quarterback position. So if the Vikings can just take care of the football and, stay on the field, I think they'll go a long way for them offensively.
Yeah, I think if the Vikings to keep pounding the football to stay balanced, they need to set themselves up for those third and short situations when it's 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2. For a defense, you can either – they don't know if they're going to pass the ball, they're going to run the ball. That's the kind of situations the Minnesota Vikings need to set themselves up in by running on first down or on second down, switching it up on them, keeping them off balance, because when the Vikings are playing down in distance, we're like they're at 3rd and 7 and 3rd and 8, that's a win for the Eagles defense. If the Eagles have them at 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, they know it's a passing down situation. The pass rushers, they're going to get after Casey Keenum, just like you said. The secondary, they know it's throwing, so that's basically a win for the Eagles on that. So it's really important for the Vikings to set them up with close and manageable situations so they don't get forced into throwing one into contested coverage. But the final key for me for the Vikings is that the defense needs to force turnovers. The Vikings defense has been amazing all season. They have a ton of playmakers like Xavier Rhodes, Harrison Smith. Eric Kendricks is a very good young linebacker. You got pass rushers like Danielle Hunter, Linval Joseph, and Everson Griffin. This defense is just completely loaded. They're one of the best defenses in the NFL. And they're going up against a guy that was a backup basically the entire season. And now he's got to start for the Eagles in an NFC Championship game. They need to get after him, get pressure on him, and make him make bad throws.
Yeah, one way they could do that is by using really only four-man rushes. I don't think they really need the blitz a lot in order to get pressure on Nick Foles, especially with that pass rush. Everson Griffin's been just phenomenal so far in these playoffs. He's been phenomenal all season long, but he's really took it up another notch in the playoffs. We saw him, absolutely just crash the party almost every single passing play against Drew Brees in that offense. Didn't really get many sacks, really, but he's creating pressure pretty much every single play. He'll need to do that again against Nick Foles, who's not very mobile, doesn't really move as well in the pocket as Drew Brees does, and doesn't get the ball out as quickly as Drew Brees does. It's going to be very imperative, like you said, for them to get pressure on Nick Foles. I think a lot of it has to start with stopping their running game, I think, first, but the Minnesota front seven is so stout, I don't think that'll be too much of a problem for them going forward in this game. But moving on, let's go to the Eagles. What are some of the keys for them in this game in order to pull off a win? Where if they do win, it's almost like an upset if you really think about it. The Vikings, again, they're favored in this one.
Yeah.
Eagles are going to be the underdogs again. So what can they do to kind of get the upset even though they're at home?
Yeah, I think last week they were able to get by the emotional roller coaster of being the underdogs to the crowd behind them, and that worked. I think this week you're going up against a much better Minnesota defense, and they need to be a lot more calmer, a lot more not as emotional, because if things go bad, they need to be able to, go back on a run of their own. They can't just let things keep getting worse and worse. But on offense, they're going up against this great Minnesota secondary. But the Eagles need to find a way to design plays to get their playmakers open, like Zach Ertz, Alshon Jeffrey, and Nelson Aguilar. And what I mean by that is that they need to either bunch them up in situations where you're forcing the secondary to communicate, and you can have communication errors and guys can get open. They can also have them go in motion, because the Vikings defense, they're very physical, but they're also very fast. Their corners, they like to play up on you. They like to jam you at the line of scrimmage, set you off your route right at the beginning. But if you're bunching up, it's very difficult to do that. You could cause natural pick plays to get guys open. And also when they're going in motion, it's very hard to, bump them at the line of scrimmage when they're in motion. So these are types of ways that they can get their playmakers open, because at the line of scrimmage, that's where Minnesota really shuts down their offense, is really disrupting routes.
Yeah, I feel like getting their receivers open in space as well go a long way to helping them out, because if they can get yards after the catch, that'll create a lot more opportunities on second and third and short, which will keep them ahead of schedule offensively, make things a lot easier for Nick Foles. So getting guys like Nelson Aguilar the ball in space where he can get yards after the catch would be very beneficial, I think, for the Eagles. But what also really helped them out too is they think established a running game early on. Like we've mentioned before, Carson Wentz going out really affected the running game, because it takes away a running element from the quarterback position that is just not there when you have Nick Foles back there. Carson Wentz can do a lot of those spread, run pass option type of things. And Nick Foles, he's just not that type of player. So they need to be able to establish the running game early on against a very strong front seven like in the Minnesota Vikings. Again, easier said than done. But if they commit to it, I think they can have some success. They have two really good backs in Jay Ajayi and LeGarrette Blount. They're going to need to get those guys the ball early on and often. And they'll have to be physical at the line of scrimmage and maybe get a little bit creative here. They're not going to have the run option or repass option plays really in the repertoire for this game because Nick Foles can't run the ball. But if they can, design some things where they can get some easy running lanes, get like 3-4 yards here and there, I think that'll go a long way for their offense and staying ahead of schedule to make things a lot easier for Nick Foles.
Yeah, and also, like you said, Carson Wentz was very crucial in the Eagles' running game. But let's not forget the Eagles still have a very good offensive line. They have Lane Johnson, who's very good. Jason Kelsey is one of the best run-blocking centers. They don't have Jason Peters, but they've done pretty well without him. But, he's a Pro Bowl talent that if they still had him, that'd be big for them. But the offensive line needs to find a way to create holes against a very tough Minnesota defensive line. That's going to go a long way in helping them, help their offense out. But finally, the final key for the Eagles is that their front seven needs to get to the passer and slow down the running game against the Minnesota Vikings, because these Eagles guys, they don't need a blitz. They got guys that can get after the quarterback one-on-one, and sometimes, they're going to have to double team guys like Fletcher Cox and also Nick Barnett and other guys on this, Brandon Graham, another guy in this Eagles front seven that's very good at getting to the passer. So they need to, get in Keenum's face, be able to win their one-on-one matchups when they have them, create turnovers and try to slow down the running game to make Minnesota be a one-dimensional team and make them try to beat you through the air and slow down the running game.
Yeah, they can make Case Keenum beat them by himself. I think they'll go a long way towards helping out the Eagles. We kind of saw against the Saints where Case Keenum, he had to make some plays through the air late in the game, and he did struggle a little bit. Obviously, he made that phenomenal play at the very end there, which was just mind-boggling how that ended up going down. But Case Keenum did have a little bit of struggles in the second half of that game, I think, which kind of allowed the Saints to come back and make that game basically. But speaking of which, let's go to who do you think is going to win this one? Who do you got, Travis?
Yeah, I have the Minnesota Vikings. I think this team is just very stacked on defense. They're going up against Nick Foles. I don't think Nick Foles is going to be able to get it done. Versus a defense like Minnesota where there's just so many great playmakers, so many guys that can cause turnovers. I think, Casey Keenum is coming off a very strong game. I think he's going to keep that momentum going against an Eagles secondary. It's not terrible, but, it's not amazing. So I think that's where they're going to really try to attack the Eagles team because the Eagles front seven is that good. But I have the Minnesota Vikings winning this game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to go with the Minnesota Vikings on this one. These are two franchises that have had some really bad luck in the playoffs throughout the course of their franchises' histories. But it seems like the Minnesota Vikings, with the Super Bowl being played at their home field, it seems like they have the good juju going for them these playoffs. They had that miracle win last week. I think their good fortune keeps on going for them in this one, and I say they pull out the win.
Yeah, that's our thoughts on the NFC Championship preview. Let us know in the comments below, who do you think is going to win? What do you think are some of the keys to the game? And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching.
Yep, thanks, guys.